this very minute. So now we are officially recording. Don't say any bad words. As always, feel free to drop questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat while Amy presents. And feel free to stick around after it's over, and we'll turn the recording off, and then we'll have the fun conversation again. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy. Amy, it is a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. You know, people always ask, how do you want to be introduced? And, you know, there's no better way than that, honestly. You could have read all my credentials, but that may have been my decade highlight introduction. So thank you. I so appreciate that. Listen, we're a relatively small group today. I can see you all on my screen at once. And, you know, I am going to share some slides, but I want it to be more conversational since we are an intimate group. I don't know if you all know each other, so I'm just going to ask that in the chat box, you put your name, your organization's name, your role, if you feel like it. And if you're outside the immediate area of the chapter, feel free to put that in too. I assume most people are from your chapter, but because we're virtual, I put it on my social media. So it's perfectly possible we've got somebody from somewhere else in the country. So go ahead and introduce yourselves, because an important part of AFP, of course, is the networking and is the connections. So I would love to see who's here. All right, so we're going to talk about board members and volunteers in general. But honestly, this is a small group. This is a dialogue. I don't really want it to turn into a monologue. So feel free to interrupt, ask questions, make comments. I will share some slides and then turn them off and we can talk. But I will start with a couple of slides. So I don't know exactly what the session was supposed to be called, but I like to talk about how board members and volunteers can raise money in 15 minutes or less. My Zoom line is getting in the way of me making this a slideshow. Here we go. All right. So anyways, and you can have my contact information later. But to me, if we really want to involve board members and volunteers in fundraising, we have to keep it simple, right? Sometimes organizations or development directors will say to me, oh, you know, my board members won't help with fundraising. And they haven't given the board members the right tools, the right templates, the right training in order to help them be successful. So we're going to go over some very simple fundraising basics and figure out how to keep it super simple so that we can all be successful in engaging our volunteers in fundraising. So, you know, sometimes we make assumptions that board members or volunteers know what fundraising is. And when we ask them to help with fundraising, they're thinking of people like shaking cans for pennies in parking lots because that's what they've seen. And so I want to make sure that every board member, every volunteer that you hope is going to help with fundraising is speaking the same language and has the same ideas and concepts about fundraising as you do. So I break fundraising down into 4 steps. You know, if you've been in fundraising a while, no doubt you've seen something like this, but really thinking about all types of fundraising. Step 1 is identification, donor identification. Who can we potentially raise money from? You know, my focus in my work is mostly on major gifts and capital campaigns. So I come to it with this frame, but this cycle works whether you're writing letters or writing grants or going after corporate sponsorships. Honestly, it doesn't matter. You have to identify who is your potential prospective donor. So whether it's a major donor, somebody you can mail to for your base of support, whether it's a grant opportunity, whatever, you need to identify. Step 2, of course, is cultivation. That's the relationship building. And I would make an argument that whether it's a corporation or a foundation or an individual, it's nice if you know something about the person, if they know something about your organization. It makes it much more likely that they're going to give you money. And then step 3, of course, is solicitation. That's the ask. Stewardship, of course, step 4, that's follow-up and thank you, everything after the ask. Now, the reason that I showed you that is I want to now reframe those same 4 steps in a, in a timeline. So this is where I think board members get confused sometimes, is they think that fundraising is all about the ask. And so we want to make sure that board members and volunteers know what fundraising really is. So I like to think about it in a time frame. So how much of my time on each donor or each fundraising process am I going to spend? So donor identification, about 20% of the time, cultivation, about 40%, solicitation, 5%, and stewardship, about 35%. Now, let me give you 2 examples to demonstrate what I mean. So let's say you're doing a corporate sponsorship for an event or whatever at your organization, and you say to your board members, I want you to help solicit, corporate sponsorship. Let's do something even more simple. Let's do a raffle ticket or a golf ticket, right? Something to your event. So they say, okay, I want to sell a ticket to my next door neighbor. I've identified them. I don't need to really cultivate them because I've lived next door to them for 20 years. So I'm going to go next door. I'm going to knock on the door, say, this organization is really important to me. Will you buy a raffle ticket or a golf ticket or a gala ticket? And then they say, thank you very much. The whole process took 6 minutes, right? Now, let's say you want to raise major gifts. Maybe you're asking for a $10,000 gift or a $100,000 gift. It doesn't really matter. The process is exactly the same, but a little bit longer. So maybe this takes a year. So you might sit down and identify donors and say, who in our database or who in our world or who do we know that could give $100,000 or $10,000, who could and might, because they might be so inclined to give. So it might take you a few weeks or a few months to identify a list of people that qualify as potential donors for a $100,000 gift. Then we want to cultivate them. So what are we going to do? We're going to get to know them. We're going to meet with them. We're going to bring them on a tour. We're going to invite them to things. That may take a few months. Then the actual ask. And I would argue that whether you're asking for $1,000 or $10,000 or $1 million, that conversation is 30, 40 minutes. In their living room or in their office, or these days over Zoom, right? You're going to have a conversation with them. That's the solicitation. Then, of course, stewardship, everything that comes after the ask. And so, that may take another couple months. So this may take a year, right? But when you show this to your volunteers or board members, and they see the ask solicitation is only a 30-minute conversation out of a year-long process, light bulbs start to go off in their heads. They're like, oh, you mean fundraising isn't all about the ask? And so we need to break down fundraising for them and show them different ways that they can be truly helpful in this process. So, a lot of times board members and our volunteers think that fundraising is all about the ask. And every time we ask them to help with fundraising, they think, I don't want to ask. I'm not good at asking. I'm too nervous to ask. I don't know how to ask. But if we give them other tools and other ways to help with fundraising, like I'll say to them, all right, there are few people in this room, if I'm in a board training, that are great at asking for money and enjoy asking for money and are willing to learn how to ask for money. The rest of you don't want to have anything to do with it. And that's okay right now. I want you guys involved in the other 95% of the fundraising process. So I want your help identifying donors. I want your help cultivating donors. I want your help thanking and following up with donors. And I'm going to leave the asking to those board members or volunteers who are good at it, willing to do it, willing to learn, etc. I will tell you that once I worked at an organization and this board member was great. He helped identify a potential donor. We had been cultivating this guy together. And when it came to solicitation, this board member wanted to ask his friend for $5,000. Well, I thought we should ask him for $25,000. And so I graciously asked the board member not to accompany me on the solicitation visit. Now, the board member was super happy and relieved to be let off the hook. And he knew that I was going to ask his friend for $25,000, but he didn't want any part of it. Well, the friend did give $25,000. And if I had brought the board member with me, we would have asked for $5,000, right? So it's not necessarily critical that the board member be involved in the actual ask, but the board member was super involved in the other 3 phases of the fundraising cycle, and we were successful together, and everybody felt great. All right. A couple more things before I turn off my slides, and then we have more of a dialogue, but do feel free to put your questions in the chat or just turn off your mute button and shout out if you want to talk to me. So the next concept I want to talk about is this pervasive fundraising myth that all donors give equal amounts. So your board members and others think that the way that fundraising works is that if you want to raise $100,000, all you have to do is find 100 people to give $1,000 each, right? And of course, the math works. 100 people times $1,000 gifts, $100,000. But you know that that's not the way fundraising works. But your board members don't understand that. So we have to teach them that. Oh, my nose is running. I need a tissue. Hold on 1 second. Talk amongst yourselves.
It's allergy season and I too have a runny nose.
Oh my gosh, it's nonstop.
And like a bad dry cough. And I'm so scared to cough in public because of the pandemic.
Everybody's like, COVID.
Yeah, right. Sorry. No, I don't know why my nose is running. Okay. I'm going to blame it on pollen here in New Jersey. Okay. So here we go. Now my clicker won't work. All right. So you know, but your board members don't, that with fundraising and with life, that 20% of your effort yields 80% of your results. So the Pareto's principle, you may know this is the 80-20 rule, right? So 80% of your fundraising dollars likely come from 20% of your donors. You may have heard this before. You can apply it to all sorts of things in life. So who has a good example? 20% of drivers cause 80% of accidents, right? You've heard that before. Or 20% of shoppers do 80% of the complaining to stores. So it turns out that this actually applies to fundraising too. So 20% of donors give 80% of the dollars. So we want our board members to actually focus on the 20% who can give us 80% instead of always paying attention to the little things, which is often what board members are focused on. So here's a gift table. I imagine if you've done a capital campaign, or maybe even if you haven't, you've seen something like this before. Just for simplicity's sake, I left it at $100,000. So let's say you want to raise $100,000. We need 1 gift and 2 or 3 prospects or potential donors to ask for $20,000. If we, ask 2 or maybe 3 people for $20,000, hopefully at least 1 will give us that full amount. And that first gift gets us 20% of our way to the goal. Now, if your board members are operating under the pervasive myth that everybody gives the same amount, they're going to ask this person who could give us $20,000 for $1,000. Because if they're doing a campaign for $100,000 and they think we want to get 100 people to give us $1,000 each, then they're going to do that. But here we are at 12 gifts here, right? The first 12 gifts get us to 70% of our goal. And for this particular table, and I just messed around with the numbers a little, we got 57 people or gifts to give us $100,000. If we had done 100 people at $1,000 each, we would have needed almost twice the number of donors. But really the first 6 got us to 70 or maybe more % of our goal. So anyways, so let me turn off my screen in just a second. We're going to do a little fundraising brainstorming here with each other, but I want to think about how board members can help with fundraising. And if I was live with you in person or facilitating a board retreat, I might put a flip chart up that looks like this, right? So we've got an easy column, a medium column, and a difficult column. And I want us to brainstorm, and you with your board members, to brainstorm a list of all the ways that they might be able to help with fundraising, or, you know, it doesn't have to be limited to board members, but volunteers. I want them, and we're going to do it a little bit here, to come up with as many ways as we can think of that they could actually help with fundraising, and to categorize them in easy, medium, and difficult. Now, the reason to do this is to get everybody thinking about all the various fundraising tasks and things that are involved with fundraising, but somebody's easy could be somebody else's difficult. And somebody's, you know, medium could be somebody else's easy. So let's take an example. Stuffing annual appeal letters. I would argue that's probably easy for everybody, right? So we've got something in the easy column. What's something that's difficult? Or medium might be serving on a committee, and difficult might be chairing a committee. So, you know, serving on the gala committee might be medium. Difficult might be chairing that committee. So I want us to think about, just have a little brainstorm. I'm going to turn my slides off and think about within the context of this fundraising cycle. So what are all the tasks and activities and ways that board members can help identify donors? What are some different ways that they can help with cultivation? What are some ways that they can help with asking, and ways that they can help with stewardship? Oops, sorry. I'll get to that in a minute, but for now, I'm going to stop sharing. All right, so let me take a break. And first of all, you know, by now I don't have to teach anybody, I don't think, to use Zoom. A year ago, I was teaching everybody how to use Zoom. Right now, I'm like pinned, so I may be big, but I have us on gallery view, so I can see you all equally. So however you like to look at your screen, but you can change it, you know, the view of it. And for those of you that don't have your camera on, if you want to turn it on for a minute, I would love to see your faces. But if you've got kids or cats running around in the background and don't want to, or you're eating your lunch, I understand that too. So let me take a breath. Thank you. Nice to see everybody. Yeah, it's fun to see each other, right? We're almost in the same room. Let me, you know what, let me give you guys 1 to 2 minutes. Why don't you jot down some ideas? You know, we could go into breakout rooms, but I think we're a small enough group that I'm not going to. I'd like you to jot down some ideas, and I'm going to go around really quickly and ask you to share 1 or 2 ideas that you've sort of, that my first 15 minutes sparked in you. So whether it's involving board members in helping with donor identification, cultivation, either currently how you get volunteers to help with fundraising, or ways that you would like, you kind of wish they would help with fundraising, whatever you're going to want to share with the group. So just jot down some ideas of really practical ways. You know, sure, it'd be great if everybody asked, but, you know, let's think of some ways that they realistically can and might. Okay, who has an idea? You know, you can put them in the chat. I would love to hear from 3 or 4 people. I guess I won't force everybody, but turn off your mic or unmute yourself, or, you know, put your hand up if you want to, if you're willing to share.
I'll share.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Beth Well, University of South Carolina. So one of the things that you said was talking about the 80-20 rule, and it made me realize, do I really know who my 20 are? You know, I know who all my normal givers are, but of those, who are the 20%? So I'm going to go back to the office and I'm going to really think about who are my top 20 instead of my top 5 or top 10 or whatever. I'm going to figure out who my top 20 are. And then the other thing I wanted to comment on volunteers is for the development side of the division and volunteering with us, because USC is, state government, and we have all these rules, it's hard for me to have somebody volunteer that can do prospecting and things because they can't have access to the database. So I have to use them in other ways. But I did want to make you aware of something that has just come out. So in one of my library units, we have hundreds of thousands of comic books that were given as a donation, $3 million value. And so we love having volunteers that will come in and help us put them in the new protective sleeves, this and that, not a big deal. During the summer, we get to have high school kids, and it's fun for them and fun for us. Well, USC has just come out with a new rule, and I guess it's because of the different harassment and things like that. We can no longer have a volunteer under the age of 18 unless everyone that they come in contact with in that division or wherever has a background check done on them. And those are $100 a pop. If we have somebody come in to volunteer and they're over 18, then we pay for them to have a check done on them. So $100 a pop. So this has just come to light in the last 3 weeks. And so it's a little bit of a challenge because when funds are tight, it's like, holy cow, you want to get volunteers, but now we've got to pay $100 a pop. And, so I thought I'd share that with the group to let y'all know this is a whole new challenge now because of legal issues and stuff. So.
Yeah. Volunteers are complicated. Now, so let me just react to one or two of the things, and then Mary, I see your hand. So you were talking about having volunteers go into the database. Of course, that's going to be a serious obstacle at most organizations. There's all sorts of issues with that, but you're at a university, right? So I would say, depending on who the volunteer is, we want to, you can print out a class list or their classmates who were in their major or people who lived in their dorm. So I don't have to let them go into the database in order to help them figure out who they know that might be a good donor. I could present them with a list of 30 names and say, do you know anybody on this list? So there are ways around that, I think, right?
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Mary.
Hello, I'm from SC Thrive. So I would say I put in the medium category, the peer-to-peer email call or, connection, email call connect, because I work the whole state. And then for difficult, I said the connecting lunch, because it is really hard to get that one volunteer to invite another person to lunch.
Yeah.
So it's that was for me.
Yeah, great. I appreciate that. And like I said, when you have your volunteers do an exercise like this, some of them will think taking people to lunch is super easy and others will think it's super hard. And so not everybody, the goal is for me to have everybody doing something that helps move the needle and helps with fundraising. They don't all have to be doing the same thing. So if somebody's like, oh my God, taking somebody out to lunch sounds like a nightmare, I don't want you doing that. Maybe you're great at writing notes to people or making phone calls, but somebody else who's like, oh, I can't wait to take somebody to lunch. Okay, great. That's that's how you're going to help. But and just a reminder, I think, as a young fundraiser, I thought I had to take everybody to lunch. It is super time consuming and expensive and a pain in the neck. So honestly, let's do drop-ins, like let's do 20-minute meetings. Like, can I come over and just, ask you 3 questions, or do you have 20 minutes to spend with me? We don't have, sometimes lunch is appropriate. I would say when we're thanking people or stewarding, sometimes we want to take them to lunch, but I just want to make sure, that we tell board members, not every fundraising meeting has to be over a meal. It can definitely just be coffee. So, all right, good. Thank you for sharing, Mary. I appreciate it. Who else?
I feel like this could be the spectrum of difficulty, but I would just love for a board member or like an engaged volunteer who's doing work for us to like attend an event when that can happen, talk to people, and then tell us what they learned and who they talked to, and then what we could do next to follow up. I would just love that. They could report back mainly is the main thing. Go and then tell me what happened.
So I want to make sure that you give them the tools so that they're successful doing that. So, what kind of information do you want them reporting back on? Because they probably don't have a clue. If you say to them, when you talk to people, tell me about your conversations, that's too vague for volunteers to follow through on successfully. So, and it's even more helpful if you say, all right, we're going into the gala, there's 100 people, 200 people in the room. So these are the 3 people that I want you to find and have enough of a conversation with that they're willing to meet with you again 2 weeks later, or that you can at least say to them, what are your key interests about our organization? And would you meet with Becky? I'm going to ask her to call you or something. They need, in order to be successful, we need to be very concrete, tangible, specific. Has anybody had luck with this kind of thing where you ask board members to talk to people in a social setting and then they report back to you? Anybody give them forms to fill out? Like, these are the 3 questions to ask, or how do they, anybody have a good example of that? Maybe it doesn't work. Nobody's been successful. Yeah, Erin, please.
I'll just share that I have done this at our galas before, where I give our board members a list of 3 to 5 people that I want them to go say thank you to or introduce themselves as a board member or whatever. And they have loved the idea of doing it, but I think they get caught up in the event. And I never get, usually the next day, what I get is, oh, I totally forgot about that list you gave me. But they love that idea. It does make them feel very useful.
It definitely is complicated. Once in a while, I've seen where, a board member will have a certain color sticker on their name tag, and then a few people in the room will have that certain color sticker on their name tags. And that means that they're their welcoming committee. And so the board member's responsible for finding the 5 or the 10 people wearing the blue or aqua sticker. And then so every board member that's sort of capable and social and willing to do this is paired up with other people, and everybody in the room has stickers. And then you say, this board member is assigned to welcome you tonight, so please make sure you find the board member with the purple sticker. And so
I love that.
Yeah. So, all right. Good. But I think that, the more concrete, the more specific, the more tangible with all things, the more successful your board members are going to be. Just like if you say, we want you to make a thank you call. Well, what do you want them to say? We need some bullet points. We need some examples. We need some sample text. We don't want them reading it, but we need to give them ideas. And, what do they do if they get a machine? What do they do if the person has a question? We need to equip our volunteers to be successful when we're asking them. And it is harder for us, but I think that they're more successful in the long run. All right, good. Who else has an idea that they're willing to share? One more?
I'll go.
Thanks, Andrew.
So this is actually from my service as a board member in a faith-based organization, which is a whole different ballgame than my world in nonprofit on the day-to-day. But I really appreciate the equal division doesn't work. So when you're looking around the church pews and say, well, we got 100 people here, we need to raise, $100,000. So everybody give $1,000 and we're done with this, is completely ineffective. It should be taught somewhere in seminary along the way. But also, I think the other piece that has been successful is set a goal, dollar amount, but also always make sure you tie a date to that. So if you're launching a new campaign or you're trying to reach a big goal, make it a sizable, set an achievable goal, but always put a date on it. That creates a sense of urgency amongst fellow board members. Otherwise, it just gets shuffled to the back of the priority list. So I think that has been helpful. And also, I think just issuing a challenge to ask one more person by the next meeting.
Yeah, I think those
so achievable. And after you do the first one, you realize it's not really that hard to do the second, third, and fourth one. But if you ask somebody to make 5 asks by the end of the year, they'll roll their eyes. But if you say, just ask one person by the next meeting and report back, it gets everybody off the starting block.
Yes, I love that. Concrete, specific, tangible, date-based accountability. Yes, ask one person by the next meeting, right? Perfect. And even talk about what are they going to ask for? How are they going to ask, right? Great. And I love the idea. I can't remember exactly what you said, but it sparked in me that we want people to have good, successful, happy experiences fundraising. And so one of the things that I've seen work really well at organizations is that board members practice asking on each other, but it's actually a real ask. So we say, okay, you want to learn how to ask, or you're ready to help raise major gifts for this organization, or we're going to have you ask for board members who have agreed that you're going to come ask them. It's quote unquote a practice ask because you're going to ask for their feedback on how you did afterwards, but they're going to say yes to something. They're going to give a gift because they're a board member, and the ask that you're making is real. And so we set them up for success and they see how it works. So anyways, all right. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me go back to my slides for a little bit and then we'll.
Amy, I had a question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
When it comes to asking your boards to activate, so to speak, what is the expected take rate on that? Because often, like our board members, I'll give you an example. Our board members, they help us raise funds, not necessarily in an individual donor manner, but oftentimes from a more strategy point of view, where they might say, you should look in this direction and see how that can work, and just let me know if you need me to connect you to anybody who can help make that happen. But as far as to introduce somebody, it's not the same. And sometimes even when we do our big fundraisers, it's more of them providing us with the list of people and then us doing the asking, which is fine because we're more than capable of doing that. But when you get to the gala, it's not really the time or the right environment to say, oh, ask so-and-so, what they think about so-and-so. People are there to enjoy the evening that they're there for.
Right. So I would say before the gala, you want to set up your follow-up plan. So yes, at the gala, having a great time, but then, 2 days later, these 3 board members have volunteered to make thank you calls, or these 3 board members have volunteered to write thank you notes or invite people to meetings. So I think one piece of it is having a really solid follow-up plan. Too often, everybody's exhausted from planning the event, honestly, and then the follow-up gets dropped. And so often, we like to say in the major gifts world that, the gala is just the onboard, the on-ramp for the fundraising, whatever you raise at your gala, whether it's 50,000 or 100,000 or whatever it is, that's just a fraction of what could be raised. And it's all about the follow-up. I don't know if I answered your question. There was a pre-gala question too.
Yeah, I
It
think
was
that,
like, oh, go ahead, Morel, sorry.
no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna chime in. I think I had like the larger theoretical question, should all board members fundraise?
Oh, okay.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So
What does that even mean these days?
right. So in my opinion, every board member needs to help in some way with fundraising, but the scope and scale to which degree they help can vary significantly, right? Some board members, will come in 10 minutes before a board meeting and write 3 thank you notes, and that's sort of what they're capable of and willing to do. Other board members are willing to do significantly more, but I do want everybody involved. Let's keep going. Let me show a few more slides and maybe we'll hammer some of these other points home a little bit. So to me, you want to have a discussion calendar throughout the year at your regular board meetings of fundraising topics. So I'm giving you a sample calendar here. It doesn't have to look like this, but it's just one sample. But if you want all your board members involved with fundraising, it needs to be a constant topic of discussion. So let's look at January for a minute. The topic is bequests, right? I don't know how active your plan giving program is at your organization, but if your board members don't ever talk about plan gifts or talk about bequests, then there's no chance that they're going to give one. And there's certainly no chance that they're going to solicit or ask anybody else for one. So, if you need help of a consultant to come in and facilitate this conversation, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But at your board meeting, right, you want to say, in advance of the board meeting, you might send out an email to every board member and say, does anybody have a charitable bequest in their will that they would be willing to share at the next board meeting? Now, it doesn't have to be to our organization. We just want you to talk about why you have a charitable bequest in your will. You don't have to say where it's going to, how easy or hard it was to sort of create that. And then have a discussion about why people might include a charity in their will, and how people do that. So, some of your board, let's just get board members comfortable having the conversation. So in March, you might talk about sponsorship, right? And your DOD, your development director, might lead this conversation, but what makes a good sponsor? What makes it more likely that a sponsor would say yes? What level of sponsorship is realistic for our organization and why? Who do we know in the community, and who do we have contacts with that would make it more likely for us to be successful in those solicitations? So having those conversations. So every single board meeting, you should be having a conversation, not giving a development report, right? Send that in advance, ask for questions, and then have a fundraising discussion so that people start to get comfortable with fundraising topics, right? So let me give you some examples. So at one meeting, we might say, all right, for the next 20 minutes, we're going to work on our storytelling, because a really important part of being a board member is being a good advocate and being able to talk about this organization. So if I were facilitating your board retreat, I would say, all right, everybody, take 3 minutes and write down, why do I serve as a board member or a volunteer at this organization? Why is this organization important to me, right? What's my story? What am I most proud of in the past few years that this organization has accomplished, right? We don't all have to be telling the same story. I want you to have a personal bent on it, because then I'm going to be able to remember it next time I'm talking to my friend. What's the impact on our community from my perspective? Not facts, figures. They can go to the website for that. They can refer their friends to you for that. How are we different or unique, right? And what's as a volunteer, what's your favorite story? Have you met a client? What's your personal touch, right? So really thinking about what's your story, and then turn to the person next to you and spend 3 to 5 minutes telling each other why this organization is important. If you have a lot of time, switch partners. And so you hear different people's stories and you can practice telling your story. So to me, telling the story of why this organization is important to you is a key board member skill in terms of fundraising, right? It's going out to the, at work or in social situations and saying, did you know that I'm part of this amazing organization? Let me tell you a little bit about it. They don't have to be asking for money. They just have to be spreading the word about your good work. Another activity or exercise that I do at a board retreat is I think about donor identification, right? How are board members going to help me open doors to their networks? That's what we want board members to do and volunteers to do, is bring more potential donors or even raise friends for the organization. So I have to help them figure out how they can help with that. So I use this little acronym. It's pretty well known in fundraising. I didn't make it up. A for access. Who do we have access to? B is for belief. Do the people that they have access to believe in the cause or the mission? And C is, do they have the capacity to make the kind of gift I'm potentially looking for? It might be $500. It might be $25. It might be $1,000. So I want them to think about, who do they know? That's number one. Because what happens is that board members actually get this backwards. What happens is when we start thinking about donor identification, the first question they ask in their minds is, who's rich, right? Do I know anybody that's rich? Nope. So I don't know anybody with capacity. I'm not going to help with fundraising. But we want them to think about it in this order. Number one, who do they have access to, right? Because if I'm going to ask the question, who's rich, I'm going to come up with Oprah or Beyonce, right? Most of us don't know Beyonce. And so if I don't have access to Beyonce, she's not a good prospect for my organization, right? Now, all right, some of us are a little more fancy than others on this call, but let's use Oprah, right? Anybody have access to Oprah? All right, so Oprah, she has all the capacity in the world. She's not a good prospect for this organization because we don't have access. We can't call her on the phone. She's not going to pick up the phone. She's not going to respond to our emails. So then I can do a little exercise with my board members thinking about who do they know. And I want to make a little diagram like this. I want them to fill in big, categories of people: friends, family, coworkers, college friends, social media friends, church friends, their kids' friends, parents, whatever. And so, because the number one thing when we talk to people about fundraising is they say, I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody. Well, that's not true. You know all these people. So if the first thing is access, you have access to all these people. Now, who do we know that also believes in the cause? So think of one person from each of these circles: one friend, one family member, one coworker, one person from college, one person in our neighborhood that might believe in the cause if we introduce them to the organization. They might turn into a donor. We don't know yet, but we want to identify potential donors. And this is how board members can help. All right. I always like to end any good fundraising session with a brag session. I think you should do this with your board members so that they get into the habit of helping with fundraising. I want you to give a shout out to board members when they've helped make thank you calls, when they've written thank you notes, when they've done anything helpful. They don't have to have raised a major gift. When they've asked their company for a donation, share that. Ask them to share their experience with other board members. Say, hey, Susie, you were able to make 5 thank you calls this month to donors. Would you be willing to share how that experience was or how it went? Did you talk? You should know ahead of time if she talked to anybody or if she had a good experience, but have a brag session. So I think the shorter, the better. If we can get board members and ask them, could you help for 15 minutes this month with fundraising? Okay, who's going to say no to that, right? So can they make a call? Can they write a note or an email? Can they share a story? Can they make an introduction? Can they send an invitation with a personal note? Can they make an ask, either online, by mail, in person? Can they make a phone call? Right? So lots of things that they can do. We want to be as specific and tangible. If we say, you know, could you write 3 thank you notes this month? Could you send 3 emails? Be specific, be concrete, be tangible. All right. We went through these 4 steps. As you're thinking about how your board members can help and how to get volunteers involved with fundraising, I want you to break them out in these categories, because your board member, when you say fundraising, what they hear is asking, right? That's what they hear. They hear, will you help ask? And if you say, will you help with cultivation? You know, what does that mean? Oh, you know, give tours, you know, sit down for coffee, introduce to the executive director, you know, ask questions. Great, they can help with that. All right, I would like to just share here. Well, I've got a board member's guide to capital campaigns in case anybody's interested. That's at my other website, the Capital Campaign Toolkit. So if you're thinking about a campaign, you can get me there. And these are the places that you can get me at amyeisenstein.com or capitalcampaigntoolkit.com. I'm going to stop sharing my slides again, and we've got a few minutes left for questions. I'm happy to hang around, but I hope I've given you some ideas, motivation, inspiration, thoughts on how you can involve your board members and your volunteers with fundraising.
I have lots of questions, so I'm going to take program chair privilege and jump in and go ahead and ask 2 of them.
Great.
Because I want to give everybody else time to think of their questions too. So one of the things I've seen with boards is you have some volunteers who think fundraising is all about the ask, and they're like, who are we asking? Who are we asking? Who are we asking? Everybody needs to be asking.
Yep.
And then you have some board members who are like, let's just do stewardship 100% of the time. And then they never want to get around to the ask.
Yes.
And so do you have some recommendations about how to find balance with your board if you've got, you know, 1 or 2 people who want to do, who are like, we got to be asking all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you get the ones who want to be stewarding all the time to act? Like, how do you find that balance?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the ones who want to be stewarding all the time, you know, I want them to do what they're good at and what they're successful at, and say, okay, you've been stewarding this person for, you know, a year. Now let's talk about what we should ask them for and whether or not you're comfortable to be involved in the ask. If they say, I'm not comfortable being involved in the ask, then you say, okay, you know, I could you call, because you've done all the stewardship, could you call and ask them to meet with me? So, you know, if that's the relationship with the other person, but some of your board members are never going to be comfortable asking, they're not going to be good at it, they're going to mess it up. So the question is, how can you push the process along and say, listen, you've done such an amazing job stewarding this person. They're probably wondering why we haven't asked them for anything yet this year. So it's time to do that. Do you want to be involved in that, or could you tee it up for me? Right.
And then how do you get some of those hard driving corporate ones to slow down and be like, dude, we can't be asking people 95 times a day. Like, we also have to balance this cultivation process.
Right, right. You know, I think every board member is different, and probably the reason to slow them down differs from board member to board member. And so I know it's a ton of work, but, you know, sitting down with them and saying, all right, listen, who's on your list for this month? What do we think we want to ask them for? And if this is somebody that we've already asked for something in the next 6 months, let's think about all the gifts we want to ask for them for in the coming year, and make a list and say, okay, let's go to this person and say, last year you gave for the raffle and the gala and the annual fund and the blah, blah, blah. And so you gave last year a total of $7,000. So this year I want to ask you to consider a gift for $10,000, which would also give you credit for your golf table and your raffle ticket and your blah, blah, blah. But we're going to come to you once for these 10 things, right? So maybe corral your board members a little more that way. And that way you get everybody to give bigger rather than them going back to the same people every time you have a golf outing or a raffle ticket or an annual fund. Say, oh my gosh, this person gave 6 times last year. That's amazing. Let's go to them and ask them if they want to be asked 6 times or if we should combine everything.
And then my next question is a diversity, equity, and inclusion question. So can you share a little bit about how you are seeing your clients and other folks you work with make space for DEI and fundraising? How are they incorporating diversifying their fundraising committees? Are people even thinking about, hey, my donor base should look more like our community and maybe be a little less white? What approaches are you seeing folks take with that? Is it even a part of the conversation?
Well, I think it is a part of the conversation at most organizations these days, and people are, there are some easier ways and more challenging ways. I think a lot of organizations are struggling with it. I don't know if everybody's tapped into the emails that come out from community-centered fundraising. So they have had some amazing ideas this year. My partner over at the Capital Campaign Toolkit just wrote a blog post about equity and inclusion for capital campaigns. And she was specifically talking about donor recognition and plaquing. And so having big plaques for active volunteers, not just for the biggest donors, but people who have contributed the most time or effort or helped on committees. And so it's not just about people who give biggest gifts, but about, you know, people who are involved and engaged and help. There was another one where she was giving an example of, I think it was, I don't know, music school or something. And so instead of having the big plaque say the name of the donor, it said the name of a famous musician, like the Louis Armstrong Room. And then in teeny tiny letters, it said the name of the donor. And so there was more of focus on the mission than the donor. I'm sure other people in the room have better ideas than I do at the moment, but so I think that's what I'll say about that. Listen, if anybody wants to email me, I'm happy to, you know, answer questions offline afterwards. There's tons of free resources at my website, and I blog on both my Amy Eisenstein blog and at the Capital Campaign Toolkit. So if you want to hear from me all year round, I hope you will visit me there. Thank you so much for having me.
Is it okay if we ask a few more questions, or do you have a hard stop?
I will take 1 or 2 more questions, and then I do have a hard stop.
Yes. All right. Well, I don't want to hog all the time. So opening it up to the floor for anybody else who wants to jump in.
Okay.
I just put something in the chat about LinkedIn. With the power of LinkedIn, are you asking board members to say, I need all of y'all to go and post, I'm a new board member, ask me about such and such organization? Is that?
Yeah, it's a great idea. I think using social media and to help them find out who they're connected to is a great idea. And that is an easy for some and hard for others. So yeah. All right.
Anybody else real quick? One more question. Going once. Going twice. I'm just going to chime in one more. So board development directors who are having a hard time getting access to the board of directors because their executive director is blocking them.
That is a very tough one. And I think that I usually recommend people looking for another job. And I hate to say that. But if your executive director doesn't trust you, I mean, partly it depends on how big the organization is. So the bigger the organization, the less people, you know, the whole development office are going to have access to the board members. But if you're at a small or mid-sized organization and you don't have access to your board members, I would say that you're probably not going to be super successful fundraising there. I'm sure there's a million exceptions to that rule, but unfortunately, that's what I have to say about that. All right, guys.
With the truth bomb. Amy, thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate your time. and sharing with
Thanks,
us your
everybody.
expertise.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
If you just want to socialize, feel free to hang out.